Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we jump into tonight's second half, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss any of the informative and exciting uploads I put out twice daily, click that bell icon. And finally, last but definitely not least, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And guys, they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with tonight's second half, shall we? All right, today I have a video clip of some younger guys. I don't know the country of origin. They are either hiking or camping in the wilderness, deep wilderness. And something is surrounding them, stalking them. You hear the howling, the very strange sounds. It's definitely not it's not an elk, a deer, or whatever. It's also from a country of unknown origin. So probably Spanish America, Central America, South America. Very terrifying. But before we get into that little clip, I want to share a couple of terrifying encounters. Today's first terrifying experience. So, for a bit of context, I live in northwestern Georgia. I'm in the middle of nowhere on a weird off and on its own cul-de-sac with houses on only one side and woods all around it. Other than a cul-de-sac, houses are all over 100 yards away from each other. The woods are thick and begin about 30 feet away from our house. The area is not known to have any bear, those are further north. No wolves or coy wolves, and our coyotes are rather small and very timid, as are the deer. I've even contacted our local DFW, and they said there was nothing bigger than coyotes and deer out here. I took the dogs out into the yard to pee 2 or 3 times after dark. I put them on a split leash and normally wander around the yard for a bit and let them find a spot. But that has come to an end. I don't dare step off the patio now. For the past few weeks, my dogs have been acting very odd when it comes to going out at night. They want to go out front, but since my landlord doesn't want me to let them ruin the front lawn, I have to drag them to the back door, and they refuse to step out most times, especially my younger dog. They want to stay close to the house. They're always very alert. They will lunge towards the woods at random, starting to bark like crazy. I'll normally call this off as wildlife, but it's been getting very strange. And normally, if there's something like a rabbit, they are very easily shushed and redirected. I heard whatever it was walking right at the edge of the woods. It doesn't have your typical 4-beat walk of a 4-legged animal, and it's not scared of my dogs. I can hear it's heavy by the way the leaves are scrunching and branches cracking. It's not afraid of my dogs or me shouting, and it does not leave. If it's there at 9 p.m., it'll be there at midnight, and it'll be there at 2 a.m., always at the edge of the woods. And I can feel the difference myself as well. Even when I go out alone, I have to grab a patio chair the other day, for example. It's almost like I can feel when it's there. I'm normally very relaxed in my yard, even at night, but I'll get that back shuddering, heart racing, get in feeling. My dogs will even go crazy inside, seemingly at random, standing at the windows, barking out at the woods. I've been out there during the day looking for things like fur scraps, scat, stag, or claw marks. Nothing's turned up, not even footsteps. I'm really trying hard to find a reasonable excuse for what might be happening, but I keep running into dead ends. I am an immigrant. I am not too knowledgeable on local stuff, folklore, or whatever you want to call it. But holy hell, this scares the life out of me. Today's second experience. I saw a sort of wolf-like creature on the side of the road. I live in a small border town in southwestern Arizona, and there's not a lot to do around here, so a good time killer is cruising around. My girlfriend and I were out on date 3 days ago, and by the end of it, we were just cruising around talking, listening to music until about 1 in the morning. We decide to call it a night, and as I'm driving her back home, we both see this giant four-legged creature on the side of the road with its back to us. Its fur was rough-looking, and it had this whitish-gray color to it. I immediately thought it was a messed-up giant mountain lion, since they are not uncommon around here. I slowed down a bit so we could get a better look, and that's when it turned around to face us, and that's when I knew we were dealing with a whole different thing here. It had the most ferocious and terrifying face I had ever seen, a long snout just like a wolf. It had its mouth open, and we could see some big, sharp-looking teeth. It was hunched over, making its back seem like a mountain, and its fur was standing up, just like a cat does when it's scared. With the lights of my car, its eyes seemed to glow a red as well. After seeing this, I stepped on the gas and got the hell out of there. My girlfriend and I were in shock for a while until I asked her if she saw that thing, or if I was going crazy. She confirmed and gave the same exact description of the creature. After a bit of digging around, I found out that the only type of wolf that was once found here was the Mexican gray wolf, but they are critically endangered now, and they have not been around here for a long time. That type of wolf can only be found now in southeastern Arizona and southwestern New Mexico. The sheer size and appearance of this thing rules out coyotes and dogs. I'm amazed and a bit worried as to what we witnessed that night. Today's third terrifying experience. This experience happened December of 2020, and this is the first and last time I've heard this noise. I'm going to add a bit of background info before I describe anything. I live in a small neighborhood on the end of a dead-end road. Only about 8 houses altogether. My house is near the end, and there is my neighbor's house at the very end, and all surrounding the neighborhood is miles of woods. I live in a rural part of my state in the United States, so this is one of those strange noises in the woods type thing. So everyone in my house has heard this thing before except me. And I've tried to catch it by sitting out at night. I love these kinds of weird, unexplained things. Well, my brother was out on the porch. It's about dusk. Pokes his head in the door. I told me to come out quick. I step out onto the porch, and he said he heard the howling, so I waited. And then I go inside because it was getting cold when it howled again. It was very close, and it sounded like it was right behind my neighbor's house. Of course, you would think it was a dog, but they only have a little chihuahua, and it's an inside dog. This howling was loud and deep and sent chills down my spine, and it continued to howl. It would stop for a few minutes, and then it would start again, and it was further away this time. We listened until it either was stopped or was too far to hear. We have set out there a couple times since to try and catch it again, but we have not heard it since. The only way I can properly describe it, although it sounds silly, is that it sounds like your typical werewolf movie. Also, we have no wolves in my state, only coyotes, and they have a more high-pitched howl and yip. Today's fourth terrifying experience. My grandfather was a badass. He was born in Alberta during the early 30s, and raised his 3 brothers on a reservation from the time he was 9. When his parents left for BC with their only daughter promising to return, none of the boys ever saw them again. To make ends meet, he learned carpentry and worked as a laborer and bare-knuckle boxed against older men for extra cash. He learned how to track and hunt and always came home with something to eat when the work was scarce. When he was 14, he put the second oldest brother in charge of the household, left the res in search of his parents and a better life. He never went back. That was the last time he saw any of his family. He had spent several months riding the rails, befriending some transients while using his fighting skills to defend himself against others. He eventually made his way to Vancouver, the last known whereabouts of his parents and sister, and started to work in a pulp mill. At 17, he met my grandmother and the two eventually married, leading to him giving up his search for his family. They bought some land and he spent his free time building several houses, which still stand to this day. One of those sat on the land he bought with my grandmother, which included acres of wooded area. On this land, my grandparents kept horses and dogs and a small farm animals for meat and eggs. My aunt was born in the early 50s, and then my mother came along right before the end of the decade. As far as I've heard, nothing bad or strange really happened until my mom found an old Ouija board and played with it by herself. But I don't know if that has any relation to this. My mother was around 8 when she was riding horses through the wooded part of their acreage. When the horse stopped dead in its tracks, my mom tried to spur it, but it was frozen with fear, and all of a sudden she smelled something like rotting garbage and meat. She pulled back on the reins, and the horse instantly turned and took back off toward the house, almost knocking her off its back several times along the way. Afterward, the horse was never the same. It would try and kick her, and if she got on it, it would fall backwards, trying to crush her beneath it. Once it started acting like its old self again, letting her climb onto it, but once she did, it ran toward the road, stopped abruptly, bucked her forward into the path of an oncoming car. My grandfather saw it happen and put a shotgun to its head. The horse just kept breathing heavily and staring straight ahead. My mother barely being missed getting run over by the car that saw the horse coming and managed to swerve. And my grandmother begged my grandfather not to shoot the horse. He finally decided to give it away when he saw that my mother was badly injured. That same horse fell on the next person to ride it, breaking its collarbone. And the father did what my grandfather said he should have done the first time. After that, animals started going missing, and one of the hunting dogs was injured by something during an attack at night. My grandfather set out some traps and stayed in the hayloft above the barn with a shotgun and rifle beside him, and he slept out there for several nights. He figured it was fox, maybe coyotes or wolves, or even a desperate bear, which is what he attributed the smell in the woods to, and the horse's reason for losing its mind. But nothing came the entire time he slept out there, and eventually he figured it had moved on to easier prey or died. The day after he stopped sleeping in the barn, my mom was out near the tree line playing with the injured dog as it was healing. Out of nowhere, the dog started sniffing the air, then positioning itself between my mom and the trees, barking and growling. My grandfather heard the noise and came out, stopped in his tracks, called back to my grandmother to bring his rifle, then whistled for the dogs. My grandma came out, handed him his gun, and asked what was going on, as all the dogs started to react like the first one. My grandfather pointed to the one of the treetops, which looked longer and thicker than those around it, but it was moving very slightly. It was at least 6 feet tall, he told me later on when he would retell the story, but probably a good bit taller. He took aim and fired just as he saw a pair of wings start to open up. Whatever was up there was watching them, but he beat it to the punch. It was a kill shot directly in its chest with a high-powered rifle. He instantly started running forward with all the dogs following him as this thing plummeted to the ground, the breaking the tree branches wholly unmistakable. When he reached the impact point, he raised his rifle again and commanded the dogs forward to flush it out. But they all just stood in the spot, keeping a spinning ground, trying to catch a scent of what seemingly disappeared. A pile of broken branches laid in the obvious landing spot, but beyond that there was no proof that anything had happened. No body, no blood, no trail. It had either disappeared or gone straight back the way it had come. He searched those woods for several days, but never found a sign of whatever this thing was, and they didn't see or experience issues with animals after that. Decades later, when he was dying, he kept talking about how he'd seen something. In his delirium, he referred to it as an alien, but said it was coming back for him. I've never seen that man scared of anything in my life, but there was actual panic and fear in his voice. A few nights before he died, he had already been too weak to stand on his own for several days. My grandmother awoke to the sound of a gunshot. She ran outside, fearing the worst, and saw my grandfather lowering his rifle, staring at something in the distance. She took the gun away and helped him back inside, and that was it. I don't know if whatever it was actually did come back for him, or if it was a hallucination from an old memory. But I'd like to think he went out with a final F.U. to the thing that tried to torment his family all those years ago. Alright guys, now here is the video footage of Origin Unknown. A group of guys either camping or hiking, and something unknown to them, and I'm sure some people will say that is a bull moose or a bull elk or whatever, but it's not, because I pulled up some calls on YouTube and listened, and it's very strange. It doesn't sound like what I heard back in '94, but you know, not everyone sounds the same, do we? So here it is.
Kejap lagi dia bunyi. Kejap lagi dia bunyi. Kejap lagi dia bunyi. Kejap lagi dia bunyi.
Alright guys, like I said, it's a short clip, origin unknown, but you can obviously see that these guys are terrified, and it is a very terrifying whatever, call, howl, especially when you're in the woods. They are deep. It appears to be that they are deep in the forest, in a country unknown, once again. Who knows? My guess is as good as yours, guys. Alright, and today's fifth terrifying encounter. When I was 19 till 27, I lived in East Texas, in the city of Taylor, Texas. This was 1985 to 93. During the time I lived there, I often heard stories about a mysterious place called Werewolf Lane in Taylor, where allegedly devil worshippers were supposed to be seen. It was a typical teenage urban or rural legend type thing. You stop your car on the bridge near the cemetery while driving over it at night, and it won't restart. A friend of a friend's cousin's friend's girlfriend's brother once saw a fill-in-the-blank spook there. Someone once got murdered there, etc., blah, 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 basically. I never really took any of these stories seriously. I first heard about the place from a friend of my brother's that he went to high school with in nearby White House, Texas. My brother's friend, Dirk, claimed that he went out there once in the daytime and someone shot at his car. He believed that he may have gotten too close to a meth lab and that the legend of Werewolf Lane was started by others who had also gotten too close to someone out there who didn't want to be seen. Another friend of my brother's, Nathan, believed that Dirk just got too close to someone hunting and just heard a stray shot. Maybe so, but no one else, to my knowledge, ever reported being shot out there. My friend Matt, however, told me the stories about Werewolf Lane, and they go back to as late as the 30s because he said his dad heard stories about the place when he was a kid. Matt's dad's old enough to be his granddad. Hearing that, I got curious and wondered what could have given rise to legends about this place, and what could possibly be so spooky about it. Well, the place they call Werewolf Lane in Taylor is now called Marsh Farm Road in Taylor, Texas. Back in the 80s and early 90s, Loop 49 didn't exist yet, and the area wasn't developed as it is now. There was no housing development down there. The road wasn't called Marsh Farm Road then. It was called Skidmore Lane. That was the official name anyway. Everyone called it Werewolf Lane. I was never able to determine how it came to be called that, though. In the 80s and early 90s, going towards Jacksonville on Highway 69, when you got to FM 2813, instead of turning right onto Farm Road, you'd turn left onto Skidmore Lane and follow it down to Barron Cemetery. The cemetery was old, run down even back then. Legend had it groups of black-robed people worshipped the devil out there at night in the cemetery. The entire road was very creepy and spooky, even in daytime, because the trees' branches overlapped each other over the street, forming a kind of tunnel. Additionally, for some weird reason, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of glass bottles tied to strings hanging from the tree branches near the cemetery. It was spooky as hell. How did whoever put them up there get them up there, and why? What were they for? Well, my brother worked at the Dairy Queen in nearby Gresham, which was off of FM 2813, the other direction. In 86, when I was 20, my brother didn't have a car, but I did. So I'd always go and pick him up after work. Because of where we lived, we had to go down Highway 69 towards Jacksonville, turn right onto FM 2813. Because I knew that Werewolf Lane was a turn to the left, I got to where I would cruise down Werewolf Lane first before I'd pick up my brother, just in case there was something to see. I never really expected to see anything, and I never did except for twice. One day, when I went to pick up my brother, who got off at 3 p.m., I cruised down to the cemetery to turn around and come back through. It was about 2:40. Lying in the road in front of the cemetery is what appeared to be a skinned dog. Yeah, that's right, a skinned dog. I slowed down, rolled my window down to get a better look. It wasn't just a dead dog, like something or someone hit it. It had no skin except for its paws and head. Someone or something had killed and skinned it. Okay, so I kind of freaked out a bit. I turned around and the dead end and drove back around out. Went to pick up my brother. He had to see this. I waited, and my brother was a little late getting out, and we left around 3:20 or so. I told him what I had seen and insisted we drive and go see it. It's now 3:30 or so, and the damn dog was gone. This freaked me out. In just under an hour, the dead, skinned dog that was lying in the street in front of the cemetery wasn't there anymore. My brother thought I made it up, but I didn't. I don't know who or why, where or anything, but there's a freaking dead, skinned dog in the street an hour ago, and now it's gone. After that, I started to wonder if maybe somebody really did do weird stuff down there. Maybe it was just a hoax to mess with the heads of someone going out there. Maybe the idea that it was close to a meth lab was true, and this was some scheme to scare people away. I have no idea. But I went there one more time a week or so later. I don't remember why, but I wasn't picking up my brother. It was daytime, though. As I passed the cemetery, I noticed a car parked on the side of the road with the hazard lights on, a woman sitting in the driver's seat. The woman was a black woman, and she looked old. She could have been in her 80s or 90s. She was wearing what looked to be like an African-styled clothes, very colorful. The woman was swaying back and forth. I thought she was sick or hurt or having a serious episode. I stopped and rolled my window down and yelled, "Ma'am, are you okay?" She didn't answer. I called out twice more, asking if she was okay or needed any help. She did not respond, so I left. It was creepy, weird as hell. Based on her clothing and the way she was swaying and moving, and based on the dead dog I had seen in the weird hanging bottles in the trees, I began to wonder if maybe voodoo or some other old slave traditional religious practice may be the root of the whole Werewolf Lane legend. I mean, the legend goes back to at least the 30s, according to my friend Matt's dad. So what if this place where the slaves and former slaves had come to secretly practice voodoo or traditional African religions? And sometimes still do. I decided to see if I could find out. I asked a reference librarian at my university's library, and all I was able to find was that area near Werewolf Lane had once been a community of freed slaves, so maybe I was onto something. I also found a reference somewhere to the hanging bottles. Supposedly it's a tradition in some southern areas, not specifically southern black, that bottles will be hung from trees on swings to ward off evil spirits. Supposedly the noise from the clanging in the wind of the bottles scares away evil spirits. I'm going to look that up again. I forgot all the details on that. So that's it. I never actually saw devil worshippers or a werewolf, but I did have 2 creepy, weird experiences. If you Google Werewolf Lane, Taylor, Texas, I'm sure you can find other stories about this place. So if you end up Googling it, it does say that the cemetery there is one of the most hauntedest places in Texas. I don't know about the legend of why it would be called Werewolf Lane, but it is very interesting. At first, when I started thinking about it, I was thinking about like the voodoo-esque part of it, and then I started thinking about the rougarou. Maybe that has something to do with it. Who knows? But it's definitely creepy, and I encourage you guys to Google it and check it out because there are some interesting pictures there. And tonight's final experience. This happened around 1920 to 1930. My late great-grandfather was in Tennessee hunting for raccoon at night with his buddy. He was armed with a doubled barrel, currently still in my grandfather's possession, and his buddy had a .22 with the 2 dogs. They were deep into a trail along a fence when they heard a crunch above them. Thank God. They look up to see a large black animal about 7 foot long with a tail watching them from the tree, silently. My great-grandfather's buddy fired a single shot at the creature, and it completely tanked off, jumped down about 15 feet, and went berserk. My great-grandfather said it had jaws like a dog, and it was strong enough to lift a 40-pound dog off the ground and kill it with a chomp. A 12-gauge round to the shoulder slows it down, but not for long. It swipes the other dog, killing it instantly. My great-grandfather's friend tries to run, but the animal swipes at him, hardly nicking his back and tearing his shirt half off his body. My great-grandfather fires his last shot into the animal's stomach and throws down his gun. The animal has most of his attention on my grandfather's buddy, who is holding a lantern out in front of him and is growling like nothing he's ever heard. My great-grandfather takes this chance to yank a fence post out of the ground and hit the animal. He clubs it over the head and spine, killing it with a few strong hits. It whimpered like a dog. After a better examination, they described the animal as having a big wolf head, big old paws with claws like a bear. It had a skinny but strong body. It was long black fur. It had a long tail like a puma. They abandoned the hunt and gut the animal so they could drag the body 2 miles back to the cabin where my great-grandfather lived in. This is where everything gets weird. Apparently, they take it to a guy with a scientific background in zoology or biology or something. The man eventually gets back to them, telling them to stay out of the forest at night, with no explanation of what this creature was. This experience was retold to me by my grandfather, so some things may be twisted by memory, but my grandfather swears full truth on this part. One more important detail about this is my great-grandfather's position on the identity of the animal. Him and his buddy, along with my great-grandmother, who had seen the body, are adamant on the fact that this was not a bear or a panther. Its head was just like a wolf's. That's the part that gets me. Bears and predatory cats use claws a lot, but wolves not so much. But they are sure it had a wolf-like head. And a little bonus. A year ago, I encountered something in the mountains. Perhaps I'm pretty shaken, and honestly, I don't know how to describe what happened or what I saw. I swear this experience is entirely truthful, and to be honest, I'm kind of hoping someone can help me on what this was. I live in a small neighborhood on top of a mountain. I am a member of and live on the eastern band of Cherokee Res. I'm 22. I live with my 22-year-old wife, with our soon-to-be 3-year-old son. Basically, my cat is outside. I tried to call him in, and some neighborhood dogs that are basically nothing but pests chase him. These dogs do nothing but kill pets, spread trash throughout the entire neighborhood, and attack people. I chased the dogs off, but my cat took off deep into the woods. We recently lost our other cat to these dogs, so now I'm worried they'll be back and get a hold of my cat. I know my way around the woods, so I grab a machete, flashlight, and head into the woods. Nothing really happens until I hear those dogs further in chasing something. I run towards it, worried that I'm about to find them ripping my cat apart. As I'm getting closer, I realize the sounds of distress I'm hearing aren't a cat, but a dog. I quickly flip off my light and get low. I move closer quietly to see what's going on. Now keep in mind, it is of course dark, but I swear to God, before my eyes was a very thin creature reminiscent of Pumpkinhead from that old horror movie. There were something like tentacles, or I don't know honestly. This thing was using its hands and tentacles to just tear into this poor dog. The entire time it's making this noise like a creaking door. I crept away as far as I could, threw up, ran home, locked the door, went to my bedroom where my son and wife were sleeping, and watched the doors till the sun came up, and then decided to type this out and share it with everyone. All right, guys, I'd like to thank you all for supporting this channel, all the kindness, and all the prayers that you guys have done for my family. My dad, he was actually taken out of his medically induced coma today. Definitely a little strange. He said that when he started to come out of it, he commented that people were looking like robots, which was kind of funny. But yeah, it was good to hear him talk, you know, see his face with like his eyes open. So thank you for all the prayers. And guys, with that, stay safe, happy, and healthy, and God bless you all.